Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a deeply unsettling yet incredibly fascinating vlog post that serves as a direct window into the terror of our own minds. Specifically, we are looking at the sheer visceral panic of waking up at 3 a.m. from a multi-layered dream. Yeah, just the premise alone is terrifying, right? I mean, waking up at 3 in the morning, your body covered in full-body goosebumps, it's that immediate intrigue mixed with just pure dread. It really doesn't feel like just a bad dream. It feels like your body is trying to sound a very real, very urgent alarm.
Exactly. And the author opens the piece with this really striking line: the warnings from our mind speak to us in the language of dreams. It's just brilliant, and it perfectly sets up the entire theme of our breakdown today.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a raw way to put it. It perfectly captures how a multi-layered dream leaves this lingering, real-world fear. Because when you have a dream that complex and that intense, you can't just brush it off and go back to sleep. You're lying there in the dark, forced to ask, okay, what is my mind desperately trying to tell me?
Right, so let's get into section 1, start of the multi-layered dream, the beginning of fear. We need to map out the exact bizarre scenario the author experienced when they slipped into this whole dream within a dream situation. The author lists several deeply disturbing elements here. They actually realize they're dreaming, but then, instead of waking up, they sink into another layer. In this new space, they encounter their wife. And she's smiling warmly at them, but she remains completely, entirely silent. And right next to her is a baby that refuses to grow and makes absolutely zero sound.
Wow, that contrast is so unbelievably unnerving. The vivid imagery of a family that looks outwardly happy, they're smiling, but fundamentally the whole thing is completely broken and static. It gives you this deeply relatable unease. It's like a snapshot of a seemingly perfect life where all actual, genuine communication has just completely died.
It really is. Moving on to section 2, deep disconnect from social self, the chasm between roles and reality. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding why the dream constructed this specific scenario in the first place. We have to look at the very first layer of the dream, which really focuses on the massive disconnect between the author's social self and their true self. So the dream actually starts off in a very public social setting. It's a gourmet TV shoot in downtown Osaka. The author is forced to follow this commanding MC around in complete silence. And worse, they are forced to eat food that dropped on the floor, cut on this totally unsanitary cutting board. The blog explains that swallowing this literal garbage represents the author's exhaustion from swallowing unwanted societal values and constantly having to suppress who they really are.
Man, that forced compliance is painfully relatable. I think we've all been in those situations where we just have to swallow our pride or our discomfort just to keep the peace at work or in a social group. The dream just takes that feeling and visualizes it as literally eating trash off the floor.
Yeah, perfectly said. And this beautifully contrasts with another figure in the dream layer. Over on one side, we have this hyper-energetic, muscular comedian dancing wildly in a tight leotard. But the author? They're just a silent observer, watching through a camera lens, meant to consume the comedian's energy but entirely unable to speak. The author points out that the comedian actually represents their own severely repressed desire to express themselves boldly.
It's just a painful irony. You desperately want to be the one loudly expressing yourself, but you're trapped in the role of the quiet, silent consumer. The gap between those two figures is literally the exact gap between who the author is and who they're allowed to be in society.
Exactly. Section 3. Sinking underground and depletion, the descent into the subconscious. That sheer exhaustion from pretending forces the dream to shift downwards. Both literally and psychologically, the narrative moves away from the brightly lit streets and just sinks underground. Let's trace how that descent happens. The physical descent in the dream is such a classic metaphor. We start at step 1, ground level, where we're dealing with the TV shoot and all those exhausting societal roles. Then, step 2, moving underground into a subterranean mall and this weird underground sea. This signifies leaving surface awareness and accessing the deep, completely unnoticed emotional layers.
Which makes perfect logical sense. When the surface world becomes way too exhausting to process, your mind retreats downward. And as you hit step 3, that deepest level, you're no longer dealing with annoying coworkers or societal rules. You are dealing with raw, primal threats.
And the things encountered in that descent are incredibly specific. At one point, the author sees 56 men in their 50s, all cosplaying characters from an anime, completely refusing maturity. And right after that, there's a massive bank where a loan is being filmed. As the blog strictly points out, this isn't just random dream weirdness. It is a direct visual representation of the author's spiritual energy running a massive deficit. They are forcing themselves to borrow external validation just to keep operating. Wow, borrowing life energy because your own personal account is heavily overdrawn. That is just a devastatingly accurate way to describe severe burnout. It gets even worse when the dreamer finally sits down for a meal after this incredibly long journey. They're served half-eaten curry soba with hard, uncooked noodles. It's the ultimate symbol of emotional malnutrition. And when the author tries to complain about how awful it is, a comedian, specifically Ujihara, and the entire TV crew just burst out laughing at them.
This part really struck me. It's the modern tragedy of having your perfectly valid pain openly mocked by others. And in the dream, that loud laughter actually wakes up the women sleeping nearby. It's your public social failures literally invading and destroying your private sense of safety.
Section 4. Mystery of Silent Wife and Baby, the chilling core of the dream. This invasion of the private sphere brings us right back to the most chilling, central part of this entire story. The dreamer turns away from all the chaotic underground stuff and looks at their own family. So here is the massive question we have to ask, and it's the exact same one the dreamer is forced to confront. Why are the wife and the baby smiling perfectly, yet absolutely refusing to speak?
The suspense here is just awful. A warm smile is supposed to mean safety, right? But when you pair it with absolute unyielding silence, it becomes the most eerie, threatening thing imaginable.
Well, according to the blog's analysis, the wife, named Sayaka in the dream, isn't literally the author's real-world spouse. She is actually a symbol of the dreamer's own inner femininity, their emotional connection, and their innate ability to nurture life. Which is what makes it so horrific. Your own internal capacity to nurture and connect is just completely shut down on you. It's keeping up appearances, projecting that smile. But inside, the lines of communication are completely dead. And then we look at the baby. In dream analysis, a baby is a symbol of new possibilities, or the inner child that desperately needs protection. But remember, this baby has no teeth, makes no sound, and isn't growing at all.
Right, while all the other babies around them in the real world are babbling and growing, the dreamer's own inner child is just frozen.
Toothless and voiceless.
It's a glaring, flashing red sign of a deeply neglected part of the self.
Exactly. When the dreamer finally asks the wife if they've been talking properly lately, she doesn't drop her smile. Instead, she delivers this absolutely terrifying line, "I haven't spoken a word. I hate communicating."
Ooh, that line just fills you with dread. It represents a total, catastrophic shutdown of the inner self. Imagine your core emotional center looking right at you and saying, "I am done talking to you."
It's chilling. Let's move to Section 5. Over-arousal and primal fear, the physical toll of chronic stress. Now, we really need to look at how the body generates these intense nightmares, focusing on the physical manifestations of the dream using the exact terminology the author lays out. The source strictly defines the driver behind this as the over-arousal state. This is a condition of extreme physical stress, where the body simply cannot fully rest. Because the physical stress is running so high, sleep becomes fragmented, and the consciousness just slides between layers, creating these trapped, multi-layered dreams. Right, and it's really important to note how incredibly practical this explanation is. It's just your body being so physically revved up by chronic stress that it completely breaks your normal sleep cycle. You are literally physically incapable of resting. The dream visualizes this over-arousal state through incredibly chaotic, overwhelming imagery. First, a sleep doctor literally appears in the dream to confirm the author has never rested properly in their entire life. Then, things escalate fast. Purple bubbles and white orbs start attacking each other, Star Wars ships are locked in massive combat, and a giant 3D animated tribe is jumping down and screaming. It sounds almost ridiculous at first, right? Until you realize what it actually represents. These aren't just random sci-fi elements. They are the body's way of visualizing a massive, uncontrollable rush of adrenaline. It's a visual translation of intense physical stress and chronic panic happening while you're supposed to be sound asleep. Absolutely. And in the deepest, most primal layer of the dream, the author finds themselves completely naked, stripped of every single social protection they usually rely on. In this totally vulnerable state, they are surrounded by sick animals covered in maggots. And finally, they see a woman whose face is fused, half radiating light and half entirely swallowed by darkness. You know, that detail about the sick animals is actually so profoundly tragic. As the blog points out, these animals aren't attacking the dreamer. They are just trying to lick them and be held. They are the ignored fragments of the author's own emotions, just desperately begging for attention.
It really is heartbreaking. Section 6. Receiving the dream's message. Practical steps for recovery. This brings us to the resolution of the whole thing. How do we respond when our body and mind send us something this extreme? We're going to focus strictly on the blog's highly practical takeaways here.
The author provides a very specific, actionable method for confronting these terrifying dreams. Step 1, when you wake up, take just 3 minutes to write down whatever fragments you can remember. Step 2, start an inner dialogue by simply saying, "I'm sorry." And step 3, just ask yourself quietly, "What am I feeling right now?" I love the simplicity of this approach. It's not demanding some massive, impossible life overhaul overnight. It's just acknowledging the pain. Writing it down pulls it out of the shadows, and just asking yourself what you feel starts repairing that completely broken communication line. And the phrase, "I'm sorry," is so incredibly vital here. It actually comes directly from the dream itself, when the author desperately tries to apologize to the silent wife and baby right before waking up. It serves as the ultimate starting point for healing the damaged relationship with your own inner self. You're simply apologizing to the parts of you that you've been forced to ignore just for the sake of social survival. It's a really powerful realization, which leaves us with one final thought to consider today. When your mind sends an emergency stop signal, a nightmare so visceral it wakes you up with full-body goosebumps at 3 a.m., will you listen to it, or will you keep ignoring the voice in the dark? That is a chilling yet incredibly helpful question to leave off on. If your inner self is screaming for a break, you owe it to yourself to answer. Thanks for walking us through this one. It has been an absolutely unforgettable breakdown.